Hello and welcome to the Wigtown Book Festival and this lunchtime event with me, Lee Randall, and our author, Kirstin Innes. Before we get too tucked in, just the housekeeping, that you can put your comments in the chat boxes and in all the various ways that are there for you to ask a question, and we'll try to get to some of those questions just at the end of the event. There are buttons and links on the website telling you how you can buy the books from the festival bookshop, which is a great way to support our authors and show them how much you love them, and donations directly to the festival, which is a great way to show the festival how you feel about it and to keep events like this coming. So, what I have learned is that according to Kirstin Innes' mom, when Kirstin was wee and quizzed about her aspirations, she'd say she was going to be a teacher in the daytime, a ballerina at the weekends, a nurse in the evenings, and write books in her spare time, to which I say, oh, the energy of youth. Luckily, ballet's loss has proven literature's gain. In 2015, Kirstin won the Guardian's Not the Booker Prize Award, voted for by readers for her debut novel, Fishnet, which looked at the lives of sex workers. Her second novel, Scabby Queen, came out this summer to great acclaim and justified acclaim. The First Minister tweeted, "Gripping and moving, a literary triumph." A.L. Kennedy has said, "Scabby Queen is the life and death struggle of a book." Kirstin Innes is aiming high, writing for readers in the early days of a better nation. And novelist Jenny Fagan has said, "Scabby Queen is vibrant, vital, relevant, brilliant, ambitious, and so truthful," to which I say, yes, tick, 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 all of the above. Scabby Queen plunges us into the life of singer and campaigner Clio Campbell by starting with her death by suicide. We connect with her through the eyes of her friends, her lovers, her family, and her enemies in jagged episodes that dance back and forth through time, but ultimately come together to form a really richly detailed mosaic. So welcome, Kirstin, and congratulations on such a terrific book. I'm hoping that because it's such an evocative piece of writing that you could start us off with a little reading just to give readers the flavor of some of the voices in the book.
Yes. So this is Scabby Queen's got about 20 different narrators at various points. Some of them do short passages and some of them do longer passages. This is Neil, who has a number of different passages throughout the book. Admit it, he thought to himself. Admit why you're here. He hadn't seen her in years, not seen her. Television didn't count, nor did the posters that went up everywhere when the singles started to sell. Cleo's wild hair smoothed out by some potion or other, her slash of lipstick a red flag, single point of colour against the monochrome. The closest he'd got was at a poll tax rally in George Square before the song had been signed, when she was welcomed on the stage by Tommy Sheridan, hand at the small of her back, as a very talented young lady with a song I think you'll like. But he'd been 1 in 1,000 that day. He couldn't fool himself that she was looking at him. Her voice had been hesitant at first, but she'd found herself quickly, the whole rally joining her on a chorus they'd only just learned. Rise Up had become the anthem of the anti-poll tax movement. Clio standing on stages in Liverpool and Edinburgh and Manchester and London, her hair in a scarf and her denim jacket studded with badges. People began to cheer for her in advance if they knew she was on the bill. Clio, Clio. Some opportunist A&R man had seen the potential and snapped her up. And Neil had eaten dinner to the incongruous sight of Gogsy Duke's ex on top of the pops, refusing to mime along and stripping off a paisley waistcoat to reveal a can't pay, won't pay t-shirt, just standing there in front of the soundless mic, staring into the camera while the recording played out around her and the rent-a-crowd bopped confusedly. There was a fade and a cut back to the grim-faced DJ who tried to smooth it out with blandishments, but you could hear Clio chanting, "We're not gonna pay her," in the background. He had loved her all over again in that minute. The single had charted at number 2 and wobbled in and out of the top 20 for a few weeks before heading back down again. Clio's antics had earned her a bit of rock and roll credibility, though. There were a couple of boozy, swoony interviews with male journalists in music magazines, lovingly documenting every pint of snake bite she ordered, every swear word her pigmented lips formed. The sense that Clio was trying to talk, and the cause itself, was in danger of being drowned out by her glamour. So Neil found himself strangely relieved when Rise Up left the top 40 and Clio's face stopped following him. She'd apparently toured as a warm-up for the House Martins. Her guest vocals soared over the grinding guitars on a teenage fan club B-side, and he'd switched over the Hogmanay programme a year later, after his mum had fallen asleep with her one and only whiskey in hand, to see Clio and Eddie Reader singing backup for the Proclaimers. There'd been no follow-up single, though, no album, no nothing for at least 2 years. And now this tour of village halls and pubs run by a local promoter. Neil suspected the record company had had enough of their anarchist pop star. All very well having a pretty face, but if the words that came out of it weren't the right ones, well, there were plenty more pretty faces out there.
Thank you. That's so encapsulates it. And in fact, so goes with my first question, which is she's so wonderfully realistic that she's not always a pleasant person to be around, which is exactly like every single one of us. And you have said in other interviews that we prefer our female celebrities young and pretty or dead and voiceless. And you've spoken about the debt that conceptually she owes to people like Carrie Fisher. And I was thinking of the Lindy West book, Shrill, because the last thing that women are allowed to be is really strong and outspoken. We get labeled shrill. And I was wondering, there is a thing in publishing. There is this expectation, especially from female writers, that their female characters will be sweet and likable, and I would rather they were identifiable and crotchety, personally. Can I ask you to talk a little bit about this expectation and how you feel about it?
Likable. I don't know. I kind of want to write characters that are kind of a 360 degree that feel real. I'm always pulled out of a book if a character doesn't feel real, and real people aren't ever one thing or another, and they can be as many different things. Within an hour, if you meet 6 different people as you're walking down the street, you're going to be a slightly different person with each one. And that's what I wanted to show by bringing quite so many kind of narrators in to look at different facets of this one woman. But yeah, it's this idea that female characters have to be likable. It's not just female characters. It's something that women are kind of trained into, isn't it?
Exactly, yeah.
Not to put your head above the parapet, not to kind of, you've got to sort of nod and be acceptable and, not be shrill. I was thinking about that Lindy West book. There's a bit in the book where Clio gets into campaigning for the independence referendum, and a fake news. The book's full of fake newspaper articles, and a fake newspaper article mentions that she's bringing authentic fishwife sensibility to the so I just kind of, it's not that I chafe against it, and it's not that I set out to write unlikable women deliberately. I just want them to feel real. And somebody like Clio, what's exciting and interesting about her to me is that she's a kind of a wrecking ball of belief and force, and that's going to cause some damage as well. So
to others and to herself.
Yeah.
I was also curious because as the passage you read alluded, she is a bit of a one-hit wonder, and an alternative book might have been the story of her rise and her ongoing, endless career. And I'm really curious as to why you chose not to give her that path, and I'm wondering if it's because you did not want to write a book that was simply an exploration of fame and celebrity. You wanted to have this character in a different background. Am I on the right track?
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I think there's a lot of the stories of fame and celebrity tend to follow kind of similar paths. There's a lot of people who do that very well and do it much more interestingly than I could. But yeah, I was interested in, it all just seemed to clunk into place. You mentioned Carrie Fisher and the impact that Carrie Fisher's death and the way the media reacted to it had on my formation of the character. And the thing that, it just didn't I didn't want her to be famous. I wanted her to have had enough notoriety that her death would kind of cause shockwaves, and enough notoriety that she could feel she could capitalize on occasionally. But I think it's much more interesting to look at life lived in challenges. I'm not particularly interested in stories about very, very rich people, for example, or people
Yeah.
to whom things come very easily. And yeah.
So for anyone tuning in who, well, I've been here 24 years and I didn't know about this card game. Can you talk about the card game that inspired the title? Because I think it also helped you. I read something that it also had an impact on the structure of the book. And I have more questions about the structure of the book, but how did the card game affect it, and what is it for those who don't know?
Yeah, so Scabby Queen is it's a card game where you get rid of 3 queens and you're just left with the queen of spades. And then the pack is shuffled, and then it's passed around. Everybody deals out their hand, and the object is to get rid of your cards and not be the player left with the queen. So you kind of pass it on to the next player by subterfuge if you can. So I was interested in that because I can't remember when I put the idea for that title together with my concept for the book, but I started out wanting to write a book about somebody who has very intense short-term relationships and blows them up and moves on to the next person, as told by the people she leaves behind along the way, rather than by that person yourself. And I kind of deliberately tried to keep people out from Clio's kind of point of view as well. And the Scabby Queen, the phrase that has different meanings within the book as well. And I tried to play on the various different meanings from all the associations of both of those words in different contexts. Because queen right now is quite on social media, and for younger kind of people, it's kind of it's a term of pride. It's a yes queen kind of thing. Yeah, after her death, she's got a younger lover, Hamza, who is quite tapped into the internet generation. And after her death, he uses that word queen to describe her as well. So I wanted to kind of play off against those two kind of ideas of it.
And you've also spoken about the fact that you wrote this book in short, intense bursts because you were having children and you were going through pregnancy. You were having a lot going on in your life, and you didn't have just one long stretch of time in which to work, and that helped influence how you put the book together. But there's also a really beautiful, there's a beautiful legacy. I can't think of all the books, but there are lots of books like Mrs. Bridge and Jenny Offal's new books, which are also segmented books where there's not a need for a continuous narrative because the story emerges anyway, and also using all these multiple narrators. So from the point of view of the actual technical job of writing it, was it just easier this way, or was it more complicated? You're like, okay, where do I go? Who do I go next? Where do I go next?
I don't know. I don't think... I actually didn't think very much at all while I was putting this together. I had such little time that no time was wasted. But with my first book, I did so much kind of structuring and restructuring and planning. Right at the end, when I had all my narrators ready, I spent a bit of time doing some color coding to work out what sequence of events I wanted to kind of reveal the information in. But I didn't do too much kind of redrafting, more just a little bit of shuffling around of the segments. But I've always been attracted to books like that. I like books that tell stories with loads of different points of view over years and years and years. I like books that kind of jump around between timelines and jump around between methods of telling, rather than just one where you spend the whole narrative inside one narrator's head in the same way. It kind of, I think it's a fun thing to kind of play around with. Yeah. I
think it's also it also trusts your readers to pay attention and to join you on the journey. It makes for an interesting relationship between author and reader, although you can't be in the room when they do it. Yeah. The other thing I liked about it which was that the more one read Scabby Queen, even though the focus was Clio, the characters also illuminated one another. You know, for example, with Neil, towards the end of the book, somebody starts talking about him, and I'm like, oh, so he's like that, is he?
Yeah.
And I was like, well, this changes things.
Yeah, I love that sort of glimpse. So yeah, there's a particular scene where you've had two of the narrators who kind of do large sections of the book, and then another character comes in and she sees both of them at a party, and yeah, I love that sort of thing. I love reading that on and just that idea of the cross pollination of the worlds. I wanted to do that quite a bit.
Yeah.
Very much enjoyed that, because it's sort of, I mean, the book is about Cleo, but also one of my reasons for picking this structure was that I find it really interesting. You can't ever see what you look like to other people, although with Zoom it's giving it a fair go.
Yeah,
it's really,
it's a tricky thing.
You can't ever kind of understand what you look like to other people. I mean, apart from anything else, when each of us looks at another person, we're bringing a whole kind of lifetime's worth of judgments and assumptions to that particular assessment. But to kind of be able to reveal what those characters seemed like to other people after you've spent time in their head, it's just fun, apart from anything else. But I thought it was quite in keeping with the way I'd written the book and the themes of the book as well. So,
no, it was a great treat. I was like, ooh, I really like the way this is playing out. So the politics of the novel are the politics, although Cleo's older than you are about to be. A lot of this was the politics of your mother and grandmother. Is that correct?
that is correct, yeah.
So can you tell us a little bit about them and about the political education you received at, let's say, at their knee?
Sure. So I was raised by a single mother, and because she was working, my grandma came up from Leicester and moved to Edinburgh to kind of help bring me and my brother up. And my grandpa came as well, but my grandpa was a bit less political by this point. My grandma was a lifelong lefty. She was in the Communist Party as a young woman. By the time I knew her, she was a very, very, very active member of the Labour Party. And I was 10 when the poll tax protests happened. And it was, I've been taken on demonstrations before. I've been told about shouting Maggie, 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 out as a kid. But I was 10 when the poll tax demonstrations happened, 9 and 10. And it was the first time that it actually made sense to me that there was this kind of idea of injustice. And that it had been committed, and that there were these two kind of layers and levels in society. So when I was approaching this, it seemed to me that it would make a lot of sense for the poll tax to be this sort of significant moment in Cleo's life. For the poll tax campaign, the anti-poll tax campaign, to be this big significant moment in Cleo's life. But yeah, I was very much, after my grandma died, we found boxes and boxes of Communist Party pamphlets, which my partner has been flicking his way through very, very excitedly for a couple of years now. It was just always there. Things seemed a lot more black and white back in the day. You know, we were Labour. I knew that we were Labour. We were not Tory. Tories were the bad guys. And, you know, that was all I knew that politics was, really. But maybe things are just more black and white when you're a child. I don't know, maybe.
And we are hugely influenced by the people that bring us up. So, so there is that, you know.
Absolutely.
My mum used to sit me down and say, religion is the opiate of the people. You know, like that kind of thing. I was like, okay, got it.
Yeah. I'm working on kindness and consent just now, raising two small boys.
Yeah.
I'm kind of, my main things are kindness and consent. That I'm kind of, it all kind of comes into it, doesn't it? I every single political interaction in the book, and I think almost, you know, extrapolating wildly, she says, but political interaction is about empathy, or a failure of empathy, I think. And so the little moments between Clio and each of the other characters, and some of the characters and each other, in the book that spur each of the chapters along is just kind of political interaction writ small, I think. That seemed a lot more sensible in my head there.
But I felt that, for me, the book also, I felt the book was asking us to examine our own moral compasses a wee bit, because there is a distinction between jumping on a bandwagon because here's a bandwagon that's quite bright and shiny and it looks fabulous, let me be part of that, and joining a cause because you, from in every fiber of your being, to be cliched, really feel concerned about that cause. And there's a bit of both going on in the book. I'm not going to do anything that's in any way a spoiler, but there's a bit of both going on in the book. And in fact, you have a lovely woman called Ida, who briefly there, but indelibly there. And she says about, she's looking at Clio on the train and she says, Ida says, her own sister, God rest her, had been this type, the sort of person who sucked in all the light, recast everyone else as spear carriers in her own personal drama. And I was like, brilliant. Yeah, that's, she's got her number.
A lot of people like Ida. With Clio, I think it's kind of actually, it's neither one thing or the other, and I wanted to show as many points of view on Clio's politics as possible, and let the audience, this is too many Zooms, audience, let the readers either make up their own mind or not be able to make up their own mind about what is motivating her to do it. I'm doing a lot of book groups on Zoom just now, so I had a conversation with some people about this last night that was quite interesting, because it was really split down the middle about whether they thought that Clio was acting because that Clio lives her life politically from cause to cause because she is propelled by a sense of needing to right injustice, or whether it's something else. For me, and I don't think just because I wrote the book my answer has to be the final one. For me, I think Clio's politics became a kind of scaffold that she built around herself, which she needed in order to kind of move on, in a way that, it wasn't, that they became kind of part of her armor, but she kind of absorbed them. She might have entered into them for various reasons, but by the time she comes to 50, she has convinced herself that this is who she is and this is part of the truth that she tells herself about herself. And whether or not other characters can kind of find accounts that might disprove that doesn't necessarily make it any less true to Clio. Yeah. I think. Yeah.
Well, I wore red lipstick in Clio's honor today. And it, on the one hand, it might seem that it's trivial to be talking about makeup, but in fact, you use lipstick and the wearing thereof to make a really strong point about identity in the book. And could you talk to the audience a little bit about that and about what you wanted to say there?
Clio goes on. Clio's, I needed a kind of visual signifier for her throughout the book. If you're going to see one character from many, many, many people's points of view, I needed her to have a kind of visual signifier throughout. So very, very red curly hair and very bright red lipstick are kind of her trademark all the way through. And possibly, a trademark that she crafted for herself as part of that scaffold.
We all do.
Yeah. So I just thought that I was thinking about it, and I was thinking about the way that working class women, because Clio was from a small mining village in Ayrshire originally, and her mother, Eileen, is always very, very made up, always impeccably glamorous. But as Clio kind of goes out and becomes an activist, she's meeting with kind of more middle-class women who are experiencing, and upper-class women who are experiencing feminism as a kind of eschewing of the trappings of the patriarchy, including makeup and etc. And Clio very much she has a speech where she stands against that. And she says that she describes her lipstick as a great big slash of solidarity. She describes the working class women putting on makeup for each other. And I think it's pretty true that women do put on makeup for each other. You know, it's part of the, she describes it as a kind of, everybody keeps appearances up in order to keep each other up, not to let the team down in kind of hard scrabble working class communities. And I just wanted to, I've been fascinated by that whenever I've kind of noticed it happening for a while. And it just all seemed to be perfect. My friend Katrina told me she'd been to see a working class artist give a speech about her lipstick, and something just clicked in with me. And I thought, oh, of course, Cleo's going to wear this lipstick. It's going to be, you know, it just seemed to make sense. The lips on the front cover actually belong to Shirley Manson.
Oh, brilliant!
On the front cover of the book, that's an old picture of Shirley Manson, who kind of Shirley Manson and Tori Amos visually contributed to my idea of Clio as a woman in music with the red hair and the red lips and the bow. So
and red being, you know, the color of danger and the color of any alert you want to give. It all fits in with the character. But
also the color of socialism as well, the red flag in politics.
But indeed, you know, in addition to Clio, I was really struck by you give her mother a speech, a beautiful speech that just felt like ventriloquism to me. And she talks very much, you know, that lipstick was always on, and it was on for a reason, to tell the world something, which is exactly what you're talking about here.
Yeah.
And you
sorry.
No, carry on.
Her mother. Well, it was apart from anything else, it seemed to be like a great symbol of what you could inherit from your parents. It seemed like a nice visual symbol, because without wanting to give too much away, Clio kind of grows up without parents in a way, but never without the impact of them. And I wanted to look at the way that Eileen and Malcolm, her parents, had kind of passed certain things, certain aspects, certain parts of themselves down to her, along with their absences and abuses in a way, and those impacts. I'm really, like I said, I like a big novel that goes over years and years, where you can see the psychological effects on different generations and different, I think that's something the novel is really, really good at, and I love books like that, so I really wanted to write something like that.
Well, and indeed you have said that the part of the novel is about the idea of growing up, and what do we want, what kind of people do we want to be when we grow up, and how do we want to be in the world, and the expectations of adulthood, that we might behave a certain way or not, you know, be more grown up, act your age kind of thing. And can you talk a little bit about that aspect of the book?
I wanted to write a woman. I mean, maybe it's because as I started writing Clio, I was myself kind of having babies and settling down and becoming mum in the mouths of midwives, and rather than Kirstin. But I was really interested just in a woman who can continue fighting. And I think it is a fight to continually reject at every stage what society expects her to be doing. She does get married at one point, but the marriage doesn't last. And there are some parallels to Robert Burns throughout the book. I didn't make them too heavy-handed, but they're both kind of working class kids from Ayrshire who leave and have fame in kind of song. You know, him being a man and her being a woman made very, very different kind of, made the choices that they had very, very different. And Clio's kind of continual fight in order to keep on maintaining that. She meets, she has a chat with, you know, an old friend who she's not seen for a while at her 50th birthday. And they've both been women in the music industry. And one of them has been ground down more than Clio has, or more than Clio's admitting to herself that she has as well. I wanted to keep looking at that, at just somebody who keeps on working to resist everything that society expects of her, and the toll it might take, and the energy that it might take, and all these things went in.
And there's a fair bit about, I'm thinking about the comparison with Burns, whereas the sexual double standard is so, he sleeps around and he's like, hey, and if a woman does that, even in the more modern age of the Clio story, it's like, no, she's tarnished. Something's wrong here.
Yeah, and obviously Burns famously had about 72 children in 37 years or something. For a woman to, it was pretty clear to me pretty early on she wasn't going to be a mother, because she wouldn't have been able to have the freedom that I needed her to have throughout her career. I mean, she moves all over Europe, all over the UK at different points, and I just needed to kind of take her out of that.
There are sections of the book set in a squat in London,
yes,
where they're all living, and I loved them because they reminded me. I won't point fingers, but watching the domestic interaction, all these right-on people, and yet domestic interaction, the men are still expecting the women to, do all the household chores and iron their, not that people in squats iron their shirts, but iron their shirts and all that stuff. And this has been going on since political groups. Everyone thinks they're so right on, and yet they don't know that you have to live it at home as well.
Yeah. Well, it was, I always wanted to write about women on the left. There was a scene, I think maybe got cut out in the early passages about the poll tax. I'm trying to remember, where she has a boyfriend, an ex-boyfriend, who's a big anti-poll tax campaigner turned local councillor, eventually turned Labour Party politician. And she's at a meeting in his house, and all the men are getting her to get them cups of juice and get them a light for their fags. And I don't know. I mean, that's the thing about the position of women on the left, where feminism and socialism or other forms of activism never seem to sit as intersectionally as they should. Is something that I wanted to explore as well. And the squat sections felt pretty rich and available for that sort of thing, but also as a way of kind of exploring the position of women on the left a little more as well. Because
I remember, being a child in the 60s, I remember later reading, people reminiscing about that time, and the women saying, well, the guys didn't think we could do anything except sleep with them. And, and I saw that again in this, and I thought, well, that's how I read it as well.
It's just, but also it gave me that part of the book goes into the I used the inspiration from the Spy Cop, as it's known, issue, where a number of women who'd been active politically on the left in activist circles realised that men who they had had relationships with were actually undercover policemen. So that seemed to kind of sit in there as well. It all just seemed to, the book just all came together in terms of all of these influences sort of coming to me at once. And it just seemed to be very important to explore all those things through Clio and the people that she met.
And again, this is possibly going to sound like a technical question, and it's also a compliment. I find that I am very much admiring your facility for conveying language, the way you convey speech. I feel like I'm watching a movie. I'm listening to a tape. How do you do it? Do you sit in cafes eavesdropping on people and getting down the cadences, or it's such a gift. I mean, thank you, but also, how do you do it?
A little bit. I do that. I started out as a journalist, and when I would transcribe my interviews, I would try and get every single little notation down, even though I knew I was making a lot of work for myself. I was in my early 20s, and it felt like a good use of energy at that time. But I would try and get down every kind of cadence and every sort of beat and aha and because people don't ever speak in a fully formed sentence from start to finish. And when you're sort of attuned to that, you can kind of pick up the different rhythms of speech a bit. I was having a chat with my wee brother about this actually, and he said, well, a lot of it could also come from the fact that we were children of a single mother, an English single mother, raised by our grandparents from England as well as but we were in quite a rough working class school in Edinburgh, Oxgangs, and it was also a great school, but it was it was a working class area, and we learned to modify our voices very early on. My brother and I both, depending on who we were talking to, and both of us still do it. I've noticed a lot the cadence switching, so I'm always attuned to other people's way of speaking as well. Maybe because I kind of, I used to be really bad for it. Once, as a journalist, I was interviewing an actress from Northern Ireland, and she went, "So which part of Belfast are you from?" Then? So I just
brilliant.
Picked up speaking without realizing it. But it's I'm really interested in the different ways and rhythms of different forms of speech, and I'm glad that it came across. I got a little compliment last night where one of the characters is from a mining, an Ayrshire mining town, and she does quite a long speech. And somebody in one of the book groups last night was in the next mining town. It was from the next mining town down from that one, and said that I'd got it. Like it was like listening to his grandma talk. So I thought, oh, thank goodness I've managed that. All right. Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, last question, and it's more general. There was a recent column written, probably for clickbait, suggesting that Scotland was short on exciting, up-and-coming female authors. So as a way to round off this lunchtime break, can you suggest a few up-and-coming female authors that we might wish to read? Who do you recommend, besides your lovely self?
Right, so the book that I'm really excited about coming out, first of all, is Jenny Fagan's Luck and Booth. It's going to be amazing. It's coming out early next year. I got a glimpse of that when I was on with Jenny at Paisley Book Festival earlier. That's going to be fantastic. Jenny Fagan is, she's just phenomenal. She's doing something else. Kerry Hudson, Lowborn.
Yeah.
Is the book that I'm giving to everybody as a gift at the moment. It's memoir. It's beautiful writing, excruciatingly wonderful, beautiful writing. And actually, do you know what? In terms of upcoming writers, they haven't got anything published yet, but look out for short stories. I've been mentoring two Scottish novelists, Ailey McCabe and Susan Sinclair, who are both working on absolutely fantastic novels just now. Then there's Kirsty Logan, and I mean, that article did many things, but to miss out the sheer brilliant otherworldliness of Kirsty Logan's fiction seems very strange to me. Helen Sedgwick writing these amazing futuristic techno thrillers. We're so rich in Scottish female writing just now. We don't have a Sally Rooney, but that's okay. Sally Rooney is Sally Rooney.
Exactly.
So yeah, that would be my comment on that.
Brilliant. Well, this is when I ask the audience to give you a round of applause. So I do it now. And it remains to me to remind the audience that the book is on sale in the festival bookshop. So just click that button. And you can also donate to the festival, and to just say thank you so much. Thank you for the book, and thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me.